Are men threatened in the MCU? Should we men be worried that Disney and the woke mob is trying to oppress us and make us bow down to women? Is the MCU malicious in their attempts to force their identity politics down our throats? If you've had these questions before, or if you've had to engage with people who make these arguments, then you've likely come across this phrase that was recently pushed around online: make Marvel male again. And it's all a big pile of BS. The phrase initially got pushed by Chris Gore, who said it was a joke, obviously, and more importantly, nerdrotic. I'm sorry, all the Turd Nation jokes have really gotten to me. However, Gary also jumped on the bandwagon and has since made merch for it. I don't actually know if he sold it, but any grown-ass man wearing a shirt like this is a virgin. Sorry, I don't make the rules. However, the phrase quickly gained some traction, and it of course stems from angry Marvel fans being upset about the recent push to include more women in superhero movies who aren't either damsels in distress or femme fatales. It's very fitting that the abbreviation of the phrase is so close to mama, because these days, Gary's definitely craving his mother's breast milk because he's a child. Now, for all the people crying that Marvel has too many women in it, and that male characters are being forced out because woke politics says it's morally good to hate men and to only portray women as strong and flawless, you're all either losers who get way too pissy about this shit that really shouldn't bother you this much, or you've fallen into the trap of anti-fandom. This is what they want you to believe. They want you to think that there's some secret agenda at Disney, where all of their properties need to force in women, people of color, and LGBT+ people to slowly turn the tides of the culture war, ultimately making men the oppressed and marginalized social group, while women reign supreme. They want you to believe this so that you begin to distrust Marvel and people on the left in general, so that you will instead keep watching their own clickbaity, low effort, and hateful content. However, I should probably slow down. It's absolutely relevant to call out this general trend of anti-fandom content, but this video is about Marvel and its hateful female agenda. So let me actually stay on topic and dispel this idea that Marvel is forcing a female agenda to the detriment of male characters. And let's begin by seeing whether this whole "make Marvel male again" slogan thingy even holds up in the first place. Let's get into it. So here's a graphic that I want to show you, and basically, if it isn't clear, this is a chart that outlines the MCU projects that have a male lead and those that have a female lead. And this doesn't look very diverse to me. It took 21 movies for there to even be one female lead. And as soon as that happened, all these snowflakes began crying about it because Brie Larson made them feel insecure. Heck, Wakanda Forever wasn't even supposed to have a female lead. Sure, he is only the lead because Chadwick Boseman sadly passed away. Otherwise, he would have been the main character. You can make the argument for a couple of these, like Eternals, but that would be very charitable. The truth is that there just really aren't as many female leads compared to the male leads. Also, if your argument is that this graphic depicts the whole of the MCU, not simply Phase 4, which is where the MCU obviously began going woke, then I have bad news for you, buddy. While the split is better in Phase 4, there are still significantly more male leads compared to female leads. Oh wait, does a male lead only count to you if they're white? Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me at this point. So again, I ask the question: does Marvel have enough men, or have they managed to push out the second most marginalized social group right behind gamers and instead have begun propping up women? The answer to that is of course a big fat no. In fact, I conclude that they still have way too many men. See, I like Marvel how I like my sex. 50-50. Also, if you're enjoying this video so far, do feel free to leave a like, it really does help me out. And if you want to support me extra, then check out my Patreon. I've recently added a new tier where you get access to all my movie, TV show, and gaming reviews. There are a lot of things that I want to review that I don't end up talking about on this channel, so that's where you'll find those if you're interested. However, let's get back to the video. Now, the phrase "make Marvel male again" isn't just a one-off example of a couple of dudes having no riz. Rather, it's simply another way for whiny superhero fans to complain about the diversification of their media, as if the superhero genre hasn't always been inclusive and progressive, at least compared to other branches of media. This example is simply part of a bigger issue, where parts of the Marvel fandom believe that there's a toxic agenda to include more women, which will ultimately be to the detriment of men. I'm sure you've come across the phrase bait and switch before, which essentially refers to how all of the new projects in Phase 4 need to portray women as better than men in order to satisfy the woke mob. It's basically the argument that even in movies with a male lead, said male lead is often shown to be a bumbling idiot while the strong woman rescues the man multiple times and always saves the day. This argument has been made for basically every project that has come out recently, except for perhaps things like Falcon and the Winter Soldier and No Way Home. I mean, don't get it twisted, all the MCU properties get called woke for some reason, but we're just focusing on the examples of women. So let's briefly go through some of the projects in Phase 4 and explain why these claims of a bait and switch are either bullshit or just severely pathetic. WandaVision has Wanda as the villain. She literally traps a whole town and forces them to play along as mindless actors, while she lives out her deranged fantasy. My verdict: no toxic feminist agenda. Loki has also been accused of being a bait and switch, even though it's pretty commonly regarded too as one of the best projects in Phase 4. Also, Sylvie was a great addition to the story. She's powerful, yes, but she doesn't outshine Loki. He's also powerful. They're literally the same person. Also, I'm sure these people didn't like Loki getting kicked in the nuts by a woman, but this doesn't really portray men as weaker. It's just a scene to showcase how the TVA are like really powerful. Loki can't just easily slither his way out of this one, and it would be boring if he could. But moving on to another man getting kicked in the nuts, Shang-Chi got beat in a fight by his sister. That's a true bait and switch, am I right? It must be. How does his sister even beat him? He should be much stronger, bigger, and more skilled. However, the scene clearly explains all of this. He got caught by surprise. He wasn't fighting at full capacity due to him being shocked that his sister is fighting him. And he could have won the fight a couple of times, but he didn't want to fight her. Also, why wouldn't she be more skilled than him? He hasn't been training properly for a while, which is basically all that she has done. Like, it wouldn't be a bad thing even if she was shown to be much better than him. But that's not even what happens. There wouldn't be a problem even if women were shown to occasionally outshine men in superhero movies. But most of the time when channels like these cry about this, it's just complete nonsense. They're pathetic. Oh, and by the way, Shang-Chi is absolutely the hero of the story. He fights off a massive monster. But oh no, it's a bait and switch. Hawkeye is also supposedly overshadowed in his own show by Kate Bishop, who's a Mary Sue who can beat up a bunch of grown-ass men without any training. However, the amount of people who just disregarded the opening credits, which showed her learning martial arts and archery, was really disappointing to see. I mean, granted, the training montage isn't anything spectacular, but it's there, which is more than can be said for a lot of other MCU characters, including Hawkeye himself. Also, if you actually watch the show, you can see how Kate Bishop has a lot of skill and talent, but since she has never used it in a real setting, she gets sloppy, and she makes a lot of mistakes. Also, Clint easily subdues her. This is not a bait and switch, it's an origin show for Kate Bishop, and a way to round off Clint's character arc. Frankly, I don't like this series very much, but if you want to criticize it, talk about its actual flaws, not cry about how capable women make you feel small and weak. It's pathetic. Now, Wanda was again the villain in Multiverse of Madness, and if your problem is that she's powerful, then please just get out. She's supposed to be fucking powerful. She held off yoked Thanos with one hand, and she didn't just kill the men, her hands were rated E for everyone. Moon Knight gets saved by the Scarlet Scarab a couple of times in Moon Knight. Boo fucking who? Listen to me, if they would only show just one scene of a man being cool and badass in this show, then we wouldn't complain about this so much. Please, Marvel, just make Moon Knight cool. As I mentioned before, Wakanda Forever didn't really have a choice. Most of the cast already consisted of women, so without Chadwick, there really aren't many men left. Again, this wasn't planned. Miss Marvel is just a cute teen show. If people are angry at it, then fuck them. Now, She-Hulk is probably the most complex out of these examples, because here there actually is a lot of focus on the dynamics between men and women. That's literally one of the core concepts of the show. However, the message is absolutely not that men are bad and women are good. If you genuinely believe that, then you simply can't engage with media, or you're too biased in this case to be critical of the media at hand. Maybe I'm being harsh here, but you know what? I'm feeling naughty today. Because yes, She-Hulk does portray a lot of men negatively. Jen meets a lot of creeps. She has to deal with online incels, and due to this, her view of men is a pretty negative one. However, this is not where she ends up. She eventually begins to meet good men, and her viewpoint begins to shift. This is a show about Jennifer. They even make a point out of that in the final episode. This is her show. It's about her struggles as a woman. That doesn't mean the struggles of men aren't important, it just means that this show is focusing on Jen and her life. She's not perfect, she's arrogant at times, she judges people, but she gets a lot more accepting by the end of the show. She actually develops as a character, which doesn't always happen in MCU projects. This show calls out weird, disgusting, and toxic men, while also showing good men who change Jennifer's worldview. If you choose to identify with the weird and creepy online incel types rather than someone like Matt Murdock, then go ahead, be my guest. It's pretty fucking questionable, but that's your prerogative. However, I think it's important to actually engage with the media rather than making up some secret agenda for you to get mad at. If you want a more in-depth video about this, then click the link on screen right now or in the description. But basically, when you go through these arguments and think about them for even a second, you realize that they're full of shit. It's not even that you can't make any sound arguments, because you can criticize the way Marvel incorporates women into their stories. These people just don't do this in a valid way. Like, I know some people who don't like it that most of the female heroes in the MCU are female versions of the male characters. This is fair, a lot of women don't like to see themselves as just the female versions of men. And sure, I mean, it would be nice to get fully original characters, however, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with what we've been given so far. All of these characters are distinct from their male counterparts. They each have their own personalities, struggles, and strengths. However, this point is valid. It's a discussion we can have. We can talk about this in a civil manner, but screaming that something is woke just because it has capable women in it, who sometimes outshine the men in a genre otherwise dominated by men, who usually always outshine and save the women. Anyone who says this is not making arguments, they're just making baseless claims that are justified by their feelings. They don't use logic. It's either that strong women scare you, or that you've been told by these channels to think this way. And listen, you can absolutely dislike any of these properties. You can think they're garbage. That's completely fine. There are many legit problems with the MCU. We could talk for days about the rushed projects, the overabundance of content, the mediocre scripts, the directing, the bad CGI. Marvel movies have begun leaving a bad taste in people's mouths, but it has very little to do with wokeness. I hope that I've given you something to think about in this video, especially regarding how people view women in the MCU. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this down below. Perhaps I am just very biased, and there really are issues with feminism in the MCU. So let's discuss this in the comment section. Are men threatened in the MCU? Are women being shoved into the story to the detriment of men? And is there any validity to the phrase "make Marvel male again"? I've given you my answer, time for you to give me yours. I hope you all have a wonderful day, stay safe, and peace out.